It's a Wednesday here on BetQL Daily alongside Joe Ostrowski. I'm Chris Mack. It means it's time to power rank some things. And we thought, why not? As a celebration of the guy who may go down as the worst umpire in Major League Baseball history, Angel Hernandez announcing his retirement. Why not power rank the worst officials in sports, Joe?
You hear the name with certain referees, officials, whatever the sport, you just know they suck. And you've spent many afternoons cursing at them, and maybe you've lost bets because of them. So I don't think a whole lot of explanation is needed. And there were some, frankly, that didn't make the cut. It's very upsetting to me. It bothered me. So maybe I'll try to work them into the conversation.
Some honorable mentions.
And in fact, one of these referees, officials, I did a slash. I cheated and I put 2 because I think they're the same person. I'll get to that in a moment. All right, number 5, I did go with Major League Baseball. With you on that theme. So many to go with. One of 2. Number 5, MLB umpire. I went with CB Buckner. God, does he suck. He's as bad as it gets. Now, there's a lot of data out there about guys that miss so many calls, I've seen ones where, I won't ruin your list. Some names like will miss 17 calls in an inning behind the plate. Like that's how bad it is, especially with all the information that we have now and all the angles and slow motion replay. But CB Buckner has traditionally been one of the worst. So for number 4, I went to the NBA. This is my split. This is where I cheated. This is the one that does have an active referee. And guess what? They were in action last night. And guess what? Their nickname was trending. And his name is Scott Foster, also known as the Extender. And he extended that series last night. We're getting a game number 5. And the cheating part is, and I mean, when you have stats like Chris Paul stats, like, okay, this is Chris Paul's record in games that Scott Foster is on the court for. Like, there's something wrong. And I'm convinced that Scott Foster, even though the hair or lack thereof is quite different, they look very different, but just the style and everything, I'm going to go Scott Foster / Joey Crawford because they're the same person. If we want to go back to yesteryear a little bit and the impact that they do have on games. So that's my NBA play, Scott Foster / Joey Crawford. For number 3, I went to the NFL, and it's just, there are guys like Hockey Lee, but Hockey Lee was actually good. We just know him because of the guns, and he made it the show about him, which I can't stand, which we'll get back to with some of these MLB umpires. But for number 3, going to the gridiron, I went with Jerome Boger. You could ask any fan base in America. I think they have issues with Jerome Boger, who is no longer refereeing. I believe he retired 1 or 2 years ago. But he's my NFL representative. Number 2, we go back to baseball. I'm guessing that this is going to be a common name on everybody's list. It should be. He's no longer in the game. But he certainly has a country album out there. Shove it, Joe West. Cowboy Joe West, number 2. I would get so mad any series that I wanted to watch or bet on, and then you see Joe West. I'm like, oh, no, he's going to be behind the plate tomorrow. Always about him. He will eject you early in the games. He doesn't care if you're the starting pitcher. He doesn't care if you did nothing. If you just took a sideways glance at him or he thinks that happened, you're out of the game. Get out of here, Cowboy Joe. Can't stand that guy. But according to all reports, he's a nice guy. But just on the field, we're not here to see you, Joe. Keep it moving. God, the worst. All right, number 1, I don't think this is going to be a repeat with anybody's list. Now, look, thought long and hard about this. Where am I going to go with it? But you just can't have special referees. You can't have it. And look, I mean, in WrestleMania is the pinnacle, right? and you're going to tell me you're going to bring in Carl Banks to be the special referee in WrestleMania 2? If you want to have him be the manager for LT against Bam Bam Bigelow, I did not have a problem with that. But you can't tell me that Carl Banks, boring-ass Carl Banks, Greg Giannotti threw a celebration at WFAN when he realized that he wasn't going to be doing his weekly appearances on the station
Right.
anymore because he's so boring. Carl Banks, number one. He's the worst referee, official, whatever. I tried to work
Seriously
Charles
went to
Robinson in
WrestleMania.
it. Charles Robinson has had the same hair for the last 3
Baby
decades.
Flair. How are you going to
He's
talk
still
smack on
there.
Baby Flair?
Yeah, I mean, I just
Oh.
wanted to work a wrestling guy in, so I
I
decided to go. I almost went Tyson, but
I was going to
he
say, I
was
thought you were going
really
to go
the
Tyson.
enforcer.
Yeah.
He was really
Yeah.
the enforcer in that one. He wasn't really the special referee in the
He was
Amazing
supposed
Race.
to be the ref. Yeah, and then he
Yeah,
quit.
yeah, but then that never happened. He lifted Stone Cold's arm. I guess that makes you the referee, but I'll go with boring Carl Banks.
We just spent 3 minutes discussing wrestling officials.
You've
What
watched
the
too
hell are
much
we
wrestling,
doing?
I think. Get outside.
That was a long. It was
Touch
a long
grass,
time
right?
ago. It was a long time
Yeah.
ago.
Okay. Mine does not include any WWE officials.
would.
Thank God. No. I tried to look at this somewhat objectively. And despite that, I came back to a guy who I can't get over the one. He had a couple bad calls in his career. Now, overall, I think he was considered a pretty decent umpire in Major League Baseball. I want to say he retired in 2022. Jerry Meals. Okay. Jerry Meals had a missed call in what would have been a perfect game for Justin Verlander back in 2011. Had a call in an Orioles-Yankees game a year later in which he called Mark Teixeira out on a double play that would have been overturned via replay. There was one the following year between the Rays and the Red Sox that he later admitted was incorrect. I think it was Daniel Nava on a play at the plate. But the one that got me, and it goes down for Pirates fans as like one of the most egregious missed calls. There was an extra inning, 19-inning game against the Atlanta Braves. And no, this isn't the playoffs back in the day. This is just mid-season, 2011. And it was a young Pirates team then that was starting to figure things out a couple years before they got to the playoffs, to the wild card. And Julio Lugo is out by like 3 feet. I mean, clearly out. And he called him safe. And it was one of the worst missed calls I've ever seen. I don't just say that as a Pirates fan. I say that as a baseball fan in general. It was terrible. So Jerry Meals gets number 5 for me. Honorable mention to, what was his name? Dan Deckinger, the guy who first base in the 1985 World Series. I mentioned that earlier. Had to completely botched call at first base between the Royals and the Cardinals. Number 4, though, I'm going to keep it in baseball again. And this time I go to a guy who I know was really lauded as being a very good umpire, but has one call that sort of crushes all of it, and that's Jim Joyce. Jim Joyce in the Armando Galarraga perfect game that wasn't because of his missed call at first. I mean, you forget it happened nearly 15 years ago, but that's really the first big major push towards mainstreaming the idea of replay in baseball. Because people are like, I can't believe that. Look, everybody can see it. And Jim Joyce knew it as soon as the game was. He probably knew it while he was on the field still. But at that point, the call was the call, and there was no way to overturn a missed call. So Armando Galarraga didn't get his perfect game.
He was crying. You remember that? Jim Joyce crying after the game?
Yeah. He was torn up about how terrible he felt. And again, he was regarded as a pretty good umpire, I think, over the years. Number 3, not a good umpire over the years. Eric Gregg. Rest in peace. Eric Gregg's strike zone was more nebulous than a random fog that rolls into downtown Boston. Seriously, there was no definition to it. You look back on was it Levon Hernandez had, what was it, like an 18 strikeout game or something ridiculous as a rookie. Maybe it was only 15 Ks. Doesn't matter. Every single punch out was a called strike three about a foot off the outside edge. Eric Gregg had dinner plans, probably. I don't know. No, that's not a shot at his weight. You can say that about any ump. They just don't want to be there some nights. And so it was terrible. Some days it was like a widescreen drive-in movie theater. It was that far off the plate and that narrow across the belt. So Eric Gregg gets the number 3 spot. Number 2, man, I can't believe he didn't even get an honorable mention from you when talking about NFL officials. He is that AI-generated voice in the back of my head every time I see not just a botched call, Joe, but then a replay that gets botched on top of the botched call. And it's Al Riveron. Hello, friends. This is Al Riveron. In reviewing the play in the Week 16 game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New England Patriots, we can see that Jesse James has the ball between both hands as it touches the ground. Therefore, we must rule this an incomplete pass, even though that's not what the rule book says. Al Riveron, for me, is the sound of every botched replay from like 4 to 5 years ago. And a lot of it led to that ridiculous year where we were able to challenge pass interference calls too. But number 1, I mean, he's the reason for the season. He's the inspiration for our power rankings. Maybe it's against the rules that I'm including him. I don't care because rules don't matter to him. Strike zone? What's that? Angel Hernandez will go down as the worst official in sports history. He has to. There's no two ways around it. The strike zone, talk about nebulous, missed calls in the field as well. This man is a walking, talking, breathing advertisement for why replay in baseball is a good thing.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's fair to make him number 1. Nobody would argue that. Nobody.
I understand the excitement in Cleveland. I do. They have pitching, they have hitting, and they're playing out of their minds right now. But they're playing out of their minds, and they've only got a 3.5 game lead in the division. It's why I still like the Royals at plus 250. They've got the highest handle at BetMGM on division bets for the AL Central, 35.6%.
Isn't that interesting when you look at the insights? There's one team that's a favorite. There's a different team that has the highest ticket percentage. And then there's a different team that has the highest handle, which you just mentioned, the Royals. And they are the biggest liability because the numbers were so large to start the season. Nobody can make their mind up in this division. And I do understand why. So first thing I did with this exercise and looking at division futures is which favorites are vulnerable. And I think you could make the case that Cleveland kind of is just because Kansas City's right there as far as run differential, almost identical this season. And Cleveland has a tough remaining schedule. So do the Royals and so do the Tigers. All 3 of those teams are top 5 toughest remaining strength of schedule, which I thought was kind of interesting. But the hard part for me is at this juncture with these current odds, is there a team down that I really trust? Like, do I look at Minnesota and think, okay, they can make a run? They could. They're also 6.5 games back. And I'm getting just better than 3-1, which I don't think is enough. You know, as we're now past Memorial Day, which a lot of people use as a marker. Like, I know there's a ton of baseball left, but when I'm looking at teams that are 6-7 games back, or if you want to make a case for Detroit 10 games back, I need a better number.